in these numbers of about how many are going to let the birds, and about how many the hot weather's going to take, and about how many are going to let little things cheat him out of big chances. Right? He must have gone through the school because he understood. He kept on sowing. Now here's what it says. The seed falls on good ground. Let me give you a promise as a leader. It always will. Key phrase. If you share a good idea often enough, it'll fall on good people. Why? The law of averages. Now, even the good ground had a variety of productivity. It said part of the good ground produced 30%. Wow. And it said part of the good ground produced 60%. Terrific. And it said part of the good ground produced 100%. What's that called? The law of averages. That's the way it is. It's called one of those things. Now, can you find some 100%ers? The answer is yes, but you got to go through the birds, and the hot weather, and the thorns and cares, and you've got to find some way to use the 30%ers and the 60%ers. And if you become entrusted as a skillful leader and learn the law of averages and learn how to deal with all this, you'll have some 100%ers to deal with, to work with. The law of averages. About putting a good team together, looking for good people. If you want to build a championship team, that's quite a challenge. How to build a successful team of people to accomplish some purpose. If you've got something in mind, whether it's enterprise or organization or whether it's church or whether it's sports, doesn't matter what it is. If you want to find good people, here's part of the challenge in finding a successful team of people. Jesus had the same purpose, right? And you can't hit them all. Jesus says, I'll take you. And that was Judas. I mean, you can't hit them all. Anyway, to put together a good team, I've got a checklist for you. It's got 4 parts to it. Here's number 1, history. It's not a bad idea to check history. Somebody's qualifications to do the job. Just take a look. Now, we can't go into too much detail on any one of these, but let me just give you the list. Number 2, check interest. If somebody's interested, they're probably a good prospect. Now, sometimes people can fake their interest. But if you've been a leader for a while, you can be a pretty good judge of whether or not somebody is faking you out on what we call true interest. And you just have to have some face-to-face conversation just to check out to the best of your ability. You won't hit it every time, but you can get pretty good at checking what we call true interest. A group came to Jesus one day and said, we wish to be disciples. He said, gentlemen, you've put your story on the wrong man. They said, wow. He said, unfortunately, I can read your heart. They said, oh. They didn't want to be disciples. They had all kinds of trickery in mind. But he picked up on it right away. And he wasn't faked out by the we wish to be. Now, you might not get quite this good at reading hearts, but I'm telling you, you can get pretty good as a leader in judging somebody's what we call true interest. Here's the third part of the checklist. Check response. Response tells you a lot about someone's integrity and character and interest and skill. If someone says you have to get there how early? You have to stay how late? The break is only 10 minutes. 2 evenings a week? Saturdays? That give you any clues? These are called clues, right? Don't go past these clues. Clues on what we call response. A person's response quickly illustrates their philosophy. We only respond based on what we know, and our attitude and philosophy is so bound up. And we might, be clever for a while, but pretty soon response is going to come truly from our philosophy. And if there's any great errors there in philosophy and attitude, here's one of the places where it shows up in response. And here's the last piece of the checklist in putting together a good team. Check results. Finally, the name of the game is results. How else are we going to judge? That's the final judge. Results. It is the name of the game. Results must soon match quality. You might have a nice guy, but finally you got to have results. Nice, don't get it. Now there's two parts to results. Here it is. Number one, activity results. Sometimes we don't ask for productivity right away. All we ask for first is activity. Now it's pretty easy to check activity. If you joined a sales organization and you're supposed to make 10 calls first week, it's pretty simple on Friday, right? Pretty simple on Friday. Say, John, how many calls did you make? John says, well, you say, John, well won't fit in my little box here. And John starts on a story. And you say, John, the reason I made this box so small is so a story won't fit. I just need an activity number from 1 to 10. Now, if the results on activity first week are not good, those have got to be signals, clues. Now, you might try another week, but you got to be the judge, right? How far you go in putting a team together with somebody's lack of precise activity. Now, finally, here's the last part, productivity. Finally, the tree must have figs. Finally. The ultimate test of a quality team is productivity. Fruit, evidence, measurable progress in reasonable time. Now, as a leader, you've got to learn to measure results and productivity and activity. And here's part of the skill of leadership. Be upfront in team building with what you expect. Don't let the surprises come later. Put it up front. God was very upfront. Old Testament. God says, if you move toward me, I move towards you. See, that's very upfront. That's called making it fairly clear. You take a step, I step. Now, I only ask you to take human steps. I take God steps. You take human steps. But you got to take a step. Because here's how else it reads. You don't move, I don't move. You say, well, that's arbitrary. Well, when you're God, you can set it up that way. When you get your planets, you can set it up however you want to. This one is set up. I got a good philosophical statement for you. Life was designed to respond, to deserve, not to need. On this planet, it doesn't read, if you need, you will reap. No, it reads, if you plant, you will reap. You say, well, I really need to reap. Then you really need to plant. Life wasn't designed for the needers. Life was designed for the planters. Life doesn't respond to what we need. Life responds to what we deserve by activity, belief, faith, action, movement. You gotta take a step. So one of the things to make clear when you're bringing somebody on board is say, Mary, if you step, we do these things. If you take 3 steps, we go this, this, and this, and this. And if you do this, we do all of this. But if you don't move, we don't move. It's very important to make it clear. Why? Because everybody needs to pay. Everybody needs to pay. Even if the payment is only token, it has to be paid. Because life responds to deserve, not need. Fascinating study. Here's one of the clues to leadership. Learn to work with the people who deserve it, not the people who need it. Now, we're talking team building now. We're talking winning a championship. We're talking putting together an enterprise. And the key to leadership is teach people how to deserve it. Teach them how to take the steps. Teach them how to make the moves. And we only ask for token moves. We only ask for limited activity. We only ask for steps in the right direction. But without the steps, we have no promise. So this is one of the most important things you can do for children, is to teach them how to deserve good things, how to deserve the favors, right? You got to pay the price. Price is how you deserve it. Here's the next key. In building a successful team, you must learn when you've got too many. It's a simple story. It comes from the Bible. Now, being an amateur, you sort of have to take my way of putting it. But good Lord said, just take my word for it. You got too many. And Gideon said, well, what should I do? And the good Lord said, try this. Get the 32,000 troops together and give them your last final ringing speech. We're off to fight the Midianite. Something like that. And he said, when you finish the speech, finish it like this. Now then, that we're off to fight, if there's anybody here that's afraid, and you think we're about to lose this battle upcoming with the Midianites, you can be excused this time, go home, can't use you this time. Gideon said, clever, should have thought of that myself. Gets the 32,000 troops together, gets up, gives his last ringing speech, and says, we're off to fight, but if there's anybody here who thinks we're going to lose, you can be excused this time. You can just go home, we're just going to take what's left. And Gideon waits. And sure enough, some went home, and the number was 22,000. Gideon says, wow. Hey, if you've got 32,000 and 22,000 think you're going to lose, guess what? You're going to lose. You got too many. Here's the key to leadership. In haste, it's possible to recruit losers. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's possible. You say, well, why is that? This is called one of those things. When you're moving, no telling who you collect, right? So here's part of the test, you know. Who thinks we're going to lose? You can be excused this time. So Gideon's got 10,000 left. He says, no problem, we'll do it with 10,000. Good Lord says, well, you still got too many. Gideon says, well, what now? And the good Lord says, try this. March the 10,000 till they're hot and thirsty down by the river, and those that are careless just drop their shield and spear and dive in the water and start drinking. You can't use them, they're too careless. But the ones that keep the spear and the shield and lap the water like a dog, keep looking and alert, those are the ones because they're trained and ready to go. Gideon said, clever. And he marches the 10,000 till they're hot and thirsty down by the river. Sure enough, when he gets to the river, some are hot and careless, and they just throw down their spear and shield and jump in the water. And the number was 9,700. Key to leadership. In haste, it's possible to recruit the careless. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's inevitable. This is called one of those things. Now, if you've got an important battle, you got to know who's careless. And this was part of the test. So Gideon says, you 9,700, home. And he sent them home, dripping home. Now he's got 300 left. Gideon said, no problem. From 32,000 to 300, Gideon is still willing to try it. We call that courageous leadership. You've got to read the story. Don't have time to give you the whole scenario, but it was a fascinating story. With 300, the battle plan was the most strange, unusual battle plan ever designed. But he won the day, chased off the Midianites. Gideon becomes the military Jewish hero of the day. His story provided for us to read one more time, which says, as a leader, remember, there are times when you may have too many. This is called inevitable. Next, don't linger too long. If you've got a job to do, sometimes you have to be fairly swift in your analysis of who will and who won't and who can and who can't. Jesus said, in putting the Christian philosophy to work, two of you take a city, and you two take a city, and you two take a city, and walk into the city and tell the story. And if they respond fairly soon, stay, and if they don't respond fairly soon, don't stay. He advised them to leave the city that didn't respond fairly soon. So you got to put some time. Now, you got to be a judge of how much time you give someone to respond or something to respond. This is part of the unusual skill of leadership, learning time dimensions, how much time to give. But Jesus was fairly clear, said, don't stay too long. If the city doesn't buy the story, he said, leave. And I think the reason was fairly clear. There are too many cities that will to linger with those who won't. It's called the law of averages. Play the law of averages. Don't stay too long. Now, he gave them some other fascinating instructions that Who knows what it all meant? He said, when you walk out of one of these cities that doesn't buy the story, wipe off your shoes. Whatever that meant in those days, no telling what that meant. If you walked out of somebody's house and wiped off your shoes, I mean, no telling what that meant. There's probably some modern gestures that are just as good, but, you know, who knows? I don't know. I'm an amateur on this stuff. So. But what it does mean, leaders must have a sense of timing. We call it measurable progress. You've got to be smart enough to measure progress, and you've got to also be smart enough to understand reasonable time. We can't be unreasonable with time. The enterprise may be lost for lingering too long and not understand scenario to understand good and evil. And however you wish to describe good and however you wish to frame your ideology of evil. There are a lot of ways to put it. For some people, evil is too strong a word. I don't know. This is part of your own philosophical conclusions that you have to come to in trying to evaluate this earthly struggle. Evil, good, tyranny, liberty, sickness, health, winning, losing, life, death, opportunity, tragedy. It's part of the life scenario. And part of it is described in rather philosophical terms on a fairly higher plane called the great war between good and evil. Now, here's part of the scenario. When the founding fathers put this country together, they said, we want maximum liberty and minimum law, but we do have to have minimum law to restrain that mysterious dark side of our nature. Because sure enough, even though we've got a good thing going called America, there are probably some people who are not going to run by the rules. So not only will we build some cities, we probably better build some jails. Why? Just to be bright enough to understand this clash, this scenario of good and evil. And all good leaders must understand this clash, this scenario, however you wish to describe it, whatever terms you wish to call it. We must understand it. Now, here's part of the understanding. Some people have sold out to the evil side. For whatever reason. You don't have to spend much time with why. All you have to do is spend time with who. I went to my 30th year class reunion a few years ago. Little small village, right, I grew up in. There was only about 150 in the graduating class. And after 30 years, almost half of the graduating class was at the reunion, which was pretty good. We had a 2-day celebration. I'm master of ceremonies. On the second day, we had a little moment to remember those who had deceased. I think there were 8. And I knew them all, so I gave a little scenario, a little story about each one. And then we took time, just a little moment of silence to remember, because some of them were very, very unique human beings, but they were gone. I thought later, 8 out of 150 after 30 years. Is that about average? Guess what I discovered? It's about average. So after 30 years out of 150, it's not will 8 be missing, it is only who will be missing. So in part of the scenario of understanding leadership, the key is to not be surprised when the inevitable occurs. Because if you become too surprised, we will call you naive. If the sun goes down, the guy says, what's happened, what's happened? It means he hasn't been here long, I guess, right? Or the guy is naive. Come on, come on. There are some things you don't want to look surprised, especially in public. If you say, why did John do that? You say, come on, come on. About so many, after so much time, are going to. And it's very sobering as to why some have chosen to give themselves over to evil, and we call it simply one of those things. But the key to leadership is to understand, and the key to leadership is to also be alert and be bright enough to spot it and to see it. All good leaders must understand the story of the frog and the scorpion. It's one of the most important stories for a leader to understand. According to the story of the frog and the scorpion, the story scenario says, the frog and the scorpion appeared on the bank of a river about the same time, and the frog was about to jump in the river and swim to the other side. And along comes the scorpion, and he sees what's about to happen, and he engages the frog in conversation, and the scorpion says to the frog, "Mr. Frog, I see that you're about to jump in the river and swim to the other side." And the frog said to the scorpion, "That is correct." And the scorpion said, "Hey, hold it. I would like to get to the other side, but unfortunately I'm a scorpion and I can't swim. Would you be so kind as to let me hop on your back and you swim across the river and deposit me on the other side? I would be grateful." And the frog looked at the scorpion and said, "No way." The frog said, "You're a scorpion, and scorpions sting frogs and kill them." He said, "I'd get out there halfway with you on my back and you'd sting me, and I'd die. You think I'm crazy? No way." The scorpion said, Hey, hold it. With your frog brain, you're not thinking. If I was to sting you out there halfway, sure, you'd die and drown, but so would I, since I'm a scorpion and I can't swim. That'd be kind of foolish. So I'm not about to do that. I just want to get to the other side." The frog thought over that reasoning and said, "That makes sense, hop on." And according to the story, the scorpion hops on the frog's back, they start across the river, and sure enough, halfway across the river, the scorpion stings the frog. They are now both about to go down for the third time. The frog cannot believe what happened. And he said to the scorpion, "Why did you do that? I'm about to die and drown, but so are you. Why would you do that?" And the scorpion said, "Because I am a scorpion." So all leaders must understand the story of the frog and the scorpion. There are shepherds, and there are sheep, and there are wolves. And wise leaders must understand some wolves are so clever, they've learned to dress up like sheep. But do not miss the story of the full drama of life called good and evil. It's part of the test of leadership skill. Awareness, sensitivity, understanding, knowing the scenario, and being on the alert for what is called the inevitable. Let me give you now, just in sort of quick succession, some studies that leaders should engage in. Let me just give you the list. We won't expand on this, but I'm sure you can expand on it in your own good time and in your own good way. But let me give you this list of studies leaders should engage in. Number one, the study of possibility. Possibility. It's so important for leaders to play the what-if game. What if we had enough people? What if we had refined people? What if we had leaders? What if we had a good team? What if we went to the market? What if we accomplished our goal? What could we accomplish? What are the dimensions? What's the size? What's the promise? We call it the what-if game. Possibilities are all around us. We must all be students of possibility. Dr. Schuler calls it possibility thinking. It's not a bad subject for study, possibilities. Number two is opportunity. Leaders must always be conscious and aware of the expanded potential for opportunity. And sometimes opportunity is closer than you think. The next subject of study is ability. Leaders must be good students of ability, their ability, and the people that are in their charge, their influence, their ability. Sometimes it's easy to have somebody right close to you and you've never discovered all of their talent and their potential. I discovered a young man in Canada, Harold Dyke, many years ago. He worked for the railroad. I think he was making about $300 a month. He'd been there 10 years. Now, this was a long time ago. But I discovered him. He became a good friend of mine. And I recruited him. And he joined my company, joined my business. The second year he was with me, he made $45,000. And now he's a leader in the community, and he's gifted and skillful, and he's financially independent, and he's a unique gentleman. Now, the railroad had him for 10 years. And they didn't know who they had. They didn't have this in-depth survey of trying to find the people that are right close around who may have some unusual gifts and capacities that nobody has yet discovered. So leaders must be students of ability and find ways to uncover somebody's unusual ability that may have been there for a while. And you've just got to find a way to uncover all of that. Part of the key to leadership. Subject number 4, inevitability. All of us should be students of inevitability. Without kidding myself, if I keep up my current daily practices, where will it take me in 10 years without being disillusioned? I don't want to just cross my fingers and walk the wrong road. I got to learn to look into the future called inevitable. Inevitability is being 200 feet from Niagara Falls in a little boat with no motor and no oars. It's called, it's over. Now, the key to that tragic story and scenario is, what a tragic place to find yourself. If somebody would have painted you this scene when you were still upstream and painted the roar of the falls in your mind and would show you what a tragic place it is, you might not have drifted this far into what we call now the inevitable. We've got to help people by painting the roar of the falls long before they get 200 feet in a little boat with no motor and no oars. You say, well, the roar of the falls is a long ways off. Yes, but the people that are around you are drifting. And by perception, you've got to see it. And you've got to level, and you've got to speak the truth so that you can give them alternate choices while there are still alternate choices. It's called the gift of leadership, helping people in life change, career change, helping people in thinking change, helping people with attitude change, to paint the inevitable. It's a key to leadership. Number 5, an important subject for leaders to study is called rationality. Being able to rightly conclude based on information. A rational, sensible course. I've got a good clue for you. Make sure what you do is the product of your own conclusion. Take advice but not orders. Let everybody around you be helpful, but then put that through your own mental computer and make sure what you do is the product of what you've concluded based on all the input. We call this a true sense of leadership. Developing rationality based on all the input. These are not easy tasks, but they're tasks that are possible. This is called walking the summit of leadership skills. And most people don't want to engage in these extra disciplines, but I'm here to promise you that the treasure and the equity is so unique that what small price is paid in these early disciplines is small compared to the treasure that accumulates as the days unfold, both for your heart and your mind and your purse. To finish, let me give you some challenges. In wrapping all of this up, I've got some good challenges for you to consider. Here's the first one. Let other people lead small lives, but not you. In the challenge of leadership and stepping up to the responsibility and the opportunity to touch somebody else's life, to help give somebody else light and direction and refinement of thought and character and activity, potential, opportunity, dreams, price. In all of this, let everybody else lead the small lives, but not you. Let everybody else cry over small hurts, but not you. Let everybody else argue over non-essentials, but not you. Deal in things that matter. The larger challenge, the larger opportunity. Here's my next challenge. As leaders, let's learn to help people not just with their jobs, but with their lives. I think we have a twofold responsibility to help people with job skills. But I think the greater responsibility is to help people with life skills. Let's don't just teach people how to work. Let's teach people how to live. How to assimilate and accumulate. Far greater treasures than just a paycheck. The treasures of awareness, understanding, setting goals, reaching into the future, growing, changing, expanding. If we'll touch people's lives as well as their skills, if they stay with us a week or a month or a year or a lifetime, on whatever occasion they should choose to leave, you want them to leave by saying, My experience there was the greatest experience of my life. And it wasn't just what I earned, it was what I learned. And last, I have an ancient scenario to give you. It comes from the Bible, and here's what it says. If you work on your gifts, they will make room for you. If you practice your gifts will make a place for you. A place of leadership. A place of influence. A place to touch someone else. To make a mark. To further an enterprise. To build a dream. Someday, if you work on your gifts, we will call you noble. We may give you rewards you cannot even now imagine. Plaques to hang on your wall, trophies to remember, but most of all, the gift of knowing yourself, that you did the best you could with what you had, the expansion of your mind and your heart and your soul and your touch and your reach and all the gifts that you possess. Your gifts, if you work on them, will make a room for you. And I've got to be one of the better examples of that. Look where my gifts have brought me. I was raised in obscurity. A little small village in Idaho. I now get to travel around the world. My gifts have brought me to this room. And what an experience it is for me to have a chance to touch you. One of the most challenging experiences in life is seeing what you can do to help someone else. And one of the greatest thrills in life is to be able to invest life into life. And you've given me that opportunity tonight, and I want to thank you for that. I've invested a bit of my life into your life, and I've considered it worth it. I want to thank